Thank you everybody for hanging around for the last day, and I'd say particular thanks to Millie for at least putting me on before lunch on the last day. I'm obviously here to talk about industry-driven training, but I'm not a policy person and not even a particularly good public speaker, I'd have to say, so hopefully I'll still be able to communicate something at least reasonably logical. I should start by giving a quick overview of my role in AGL's Merchant Operations Group. And I should have checked how that's going to work. Okay, that's me. So about AGL Energy, here is the slide. The most important part of that slide, as I can't quite see it, is that more than 10,000 megawatts of generation capacity, so which is pretty important. Plenty of customers. What is called in the industry now a gentailer, so a generator and a retailer with two almost separate bits of the business. So one running the significant number of generation assets and the other being the company's kind of public retailing face. And of course, those of you particularly from New South Wales will be aware of AGL's significant investments in coal seam gas and also gas retailing. So that's the slide I'm after. I have been given the responsibility as Competency Development Manager of bringing a consistency of approach to technical training across the what AGL calls its merchant operations assets. So, and you can see them here. There is AGL Hydro, so about 800 megawatts of hydroelectric capacity, including kind of newly built assets, as well as some quite old assets that have been significantly refurbished by AGL over the past kind of 5 to 7 years. AGL Torrens over in Adelaide, so a gas-fired steam power plant on the northern suburbs of Adelaide. AGL Macquarie, so a large amount, sort of more than 500 megawatts of black coal-fired power. Once again, about 600 or 800 megawatts of wind capacity, spread mostly across Western Victoria and South Australia. AGL Loy Yang, alongside the mine, a very large brown coal fired power plant, and also the solar flagships program. We'll we have heard and we will continue to hear a fair bit about solar. So that solar flagships program is two solar farms in New South Wales, one at Nyngan and one at Broken Hill, with a total capacity of 150 megawatts. And that's just pretty much rooftop PV, just laid out in paddocks. There's no moving it to the sun. It's pretty standard stuff, but lots of it. So wonderful scale in those projects that AGL is currently building. So as I said, I've been given the task of bringing a consistency of approach to technical training across these assets, because AGL has essentially either built them or purchased them all inside the last 10 years. So they've either training systems being required from scratch, in the case of the wind and solar, or in the case of the established power plants, there are systems and people in place. And I've also been told that we should align these training systems wherever possible to the national training packages. And this is a very good thing for the package and for EOS, but certainly not without challenges. And I can see this may involve some reshaping of the package, and the way EOS goes about managing it, which is really the reason I wanted to talk about this today. So, being really asked to use the package across this significant workforce has very much focused my mind on some of the key issues related to this presentation. But the fact that I've been sitting here listening to a number of views that impact on what I was going to say also means that some of the few things I want to talk about are still pretty fluid in my mind, with the real variety of information and views presented here. So, in both the vet sector and the electricity supply industry, It seems we live in interesting times, particularly those currently working closely with or in ISCs. And it's been truly great to hear about it over the last couple of days. So on the one hand, of course, we have technology such as rooftop solar, and particularly solar, expanding rapidly, along with falling use of electricity due to energy efficiency advancements. And also, very much interesting is that the batteries to store this solar energy on rooftops, whether you buy a battery or whether you just have the battery in your electric car connected to your house's solar system, are really threatening to change the game fundamentally. Some creative destruction is happening in the industry of the supply of electricity to households. While on the other hand, we have a federal government determined, it seems, to make radical change to the training systems we've become accustomed to. And I choose that word, or that phrase, become accustomed to, quite carefully. I was going to say been using there. But very important part of it, which one? That one? Very important part of what I wanted to say today is that the industry will take or leave a training system, depending on whether it is useful, or it will pick the useful bits and discard the rest. And that is very evident from my first 6 months at AGL, because virtually all the generation assets that AGL has acquired over the past decade, none of them have been using the national system and qualifications in any planned, consistent fashion beyond basic compliance training. Now, I imagine there are probably some RTOs in the room who've looked wonderingly at these monoliths and even attempted to have a crack at getting them to use the national systems, or even worked with them in some degree on that. But the important question is why. I should say, the interesting thing is though, when you walk around and you dive into these training systems, they've all engaged with the national package at some point, mostly early on. And that's to train operators, to train maintenance staff, and they have all walked away at some stage. They've all decided, okay then, this is useful to us, we'll take that, but we don't need the quals. We don't need RTOs, we'll just do it internally. And we'll take this information we have drawn out of the national training package to assist us to do that. And, as I said, going back to where I should have been, the important question is why? And what do we need to do to make the alignment of the AGL generation assets to the national training system an ongoing success and a model for other large generators to follow? So, if I go back to that slide. But, setting that aside and back in the context of the current political situation around the package, I heard someone say recently that they felt that the VEC sector is rather like a jelly, that if you whack it, it'll wobble furiously and then settle back into shape. It was a very interesting conception at the time, worth pondering, and I certainly heard a reflection of it in conversations with people here yesterday. It sparked a fair bit of conversation at the time I first heard it, which was at the Skills DMC conference, so that's the Mining and Resources and Civil Construction ISC conference in Brisbane, which was the same day that Minister Ian Macfarlane delivered his first kind of broadside at the National Training System. But most people seem to think the jelly was a pretty accurate characterisation. Nonetheless, I certainly think it's a characterisation we're going to see sorely tested in the next couple of years. Up here is just a couple of sentences I've pulled out of communication on the Minister's website, talking about, and really what I think is very much centring this concept of industry driven to the Minister's idea for where he wants the training system to be. And that's kind of why, once again, one of the key reasons for me to talk on the subject today. But I want to be fully clear that I'm supportive, very supportive of EOS and the work they do. I think this is actually a very good model for the development of qualifications and the delivery of training. It is a bit embarrassing, but I can tell you the story that my mother, back in the early 90s, was a public servant who found herself at the Australian National Training Authority back in 1993, 94. And she still tells the story. She's getting on a bit, so she tells it a few times. I've heard it. In the early 90s, tells the story of a negotiation between herself and a colleague of hers, who later became her husband, and the team from ANTA, including Terry Moran, who was a man who went on to some very senior roles in state and federal government. And they negotiated with a young union official named Peter Tighe. My mother maintains to this day that Peter did a whole lot better in that negotiation than he should have. There was no way he should have got as much as he did. He pulled it over Terry Moran very, very effectively, was her view. And he secured a very firm base for EOS. And my work with EOS over the past few years has not been without its frustrations, but nonetheless, I think I've been able to work very effectively through issues, and this is a good model. However, Ian Macfarlane, the Minister for Industry, has recently given the sector, or jelly, a pretty severe whack, and he seems fervently to hope that it will not settle back into place. And it seems to me that the concept of industry-driven is central to his understanding and will be central to the changes he wants to make to the system. That's why I want to explore the concept today, because I think forums like this really need to consider it and make our voices heard. Because we are the industry and we need to argue this through. What is industry-driven training? Or this concept and its application will be determined by the bureaucrats in Canberra. To start with, very simply, who is industry? And this is a little interesting because we use this word in a whole number of ways. And I think I heard my colleague, my esteemed colleague Kate Coates state that yesterday, that this is the industry here. But I'm pretty sure that the Minister for Industry is not talking about this industry when he says industry-driven training. He's talking about me and my peers and the industry organisations that we certainly have represented here as well. Puts me in charge, which is all very well and good in some ways, but the point here is that we all need to think about what role we play as a stakeholder in the industry and why it's important. And just for the purpose of clarity, what do I mean by training here? For this purpose, I mean the lot: the training package, the quals, the funding models, the delivery of training and assessment services. So that's certainly just a little bit of context. And so to the key bit, put those things together, and what do I mean by industry-driven? And here is where it gets a little bit potentially ugly, because I certainly I kind of agree with a lot of what the Minister is saying. I think RTOs have had too much input into the shape and function of the training package during my time involved with it. But this is precisely because industry has not engaged at nearly the level it should. RTOs have had this input just logically because they have the most skin in the game. They rely on the package. Whereas, as I said before, industry just walks away. Yeah, it's no longer worth my time. And unfortunately they have, in a lot of cases, particularly in generation. And are just using it for absolute basic compliance requirements at the AGL assets. Why bother trying to engage in a long and arduous process of bringing about change in the package to suit your business when you can just take what you need and leave? And it's really been, in my experience, it's been EOS who've often had to stand up and almost play that part of the industry in the discussions and the development of training packages, which really their role should be to draw industry in. But that's been difficult for a whole host of reasons. So, and one of the things, unfortunately, I did hear yesterday and took away, that is inside this context of creative destruction of the electricity supply industry, which is on us. We have a training package and a system that supports it that is very slow to change. A jelly. Still able to change, and we saw that yesterday as well. And I applaud the decoupling of competency from time served on a number of levels. But even yesterday we heard tales of woe from a TAFE and an RTO up here. And David and Mary may still be around, I'll hear it again, about the difficulty of this implementation and the changes in their businesses. We really did hear this has been a difficult thing to do. And this was the last difficult stage of a slow and torturous process to get this change in place in the face of recalcitrance from a whole range of areas. This final step was just the trade teachers who had been doing things the same way for a number of years and struggled to cope with the change that was happening. And I haven't been really involved in this, but the people I've talked to, I certainly know that there was naysayers and blockers all the way along this change, as you would expect, because it is risky business. Just note on this though, please, I agree with the reservations expressed yesterday that we need to be very wary of rogue RTOs using lax or rushed assessments to increase revenues. Make no mistake, all of us need to proceed with caution, but we do need to proceed, undoubtedly. Bob said it very bluntly this morning. We're going to move or we will be run over. So, what does it mean to me to have the training system and the package more industry driven? Simply, I mean high quality training and assessment services efficiently delivered against a package that meets local needs, driven by the needs of the industry. And the key things there is high quality and efficiency and flexibility. I do want to approach the question a little bit before I get into detail on that of why we need to act to make the training package and delivery of training services more industry focused. And my thoughts on this and the initial focus was that the industry knows the skills they need. Most training managers, I know not me, started on the tools. So there are people like me who need to spend time to understand the jobs, but a lot of training managers understand it in detail. And if an organisation doesn't, certainly there are RTOs that can step in and do that. But organisations need to engage with this process. Otherwise, and if you're not engaged with this process, and I've seen this, I'll tell the story that I even received a quote earlier this year from an RTO who I'd asked to deliver some training and map the skills of a certain role to the national training package. And I got a quote that says, "We will map the training we're developing for you to the national package, but the map delivered will be restricted to units that are currently on our scope." Well, doesn't that suit you nicely? But it struck me as a bit lazy. But that's what happens when industry doesn't engage with the skills they have. They get what's on the scope of the RTO they call. Secondly, organisations know what is learned on the job and what the underpinning knowledge is. Most people will have heard of the 70-20-10 rule. And I'm afraid I don't have a fancy website that everybody can click into. Yes, I know it. No, I don't. And a fancy graph. I was very impressed by that. It'd be great. Almost thought I'll have a show of hands just to show that there's still another way of doing that. But that 70-20-10 rule, 70% of what you learn is done on the job, 20% through mentoring and coaching and 10% in the classroom, is the rule at AGL and more businesses that I talk to. And I want my training providers to support it. And I understand in some level of detail what needs to be done at each of those points. But I think it's not just RTOs, but it's the package needs some rethinking to support this growing notion reflected in the training. And we need to think very hard about what that 10 of the 70-20-10 is. And this is good. It aligns to competency-based advancement. This may, or I should say will, get me into arguments, but I've had this argument with people on the 70-20-10 rule internally. But what I have seen, having looked at the training systems in place across quite a few power stations now, is that unfortunately one of the drivers for stakeholders with training responsibilities has been to increase the opportunities for overtime for the workforce through the development of training, through the extension of training, through just padding out the training a little. Make no mistake, the driver is there, it's not everywhere. And corresponding to that, there's a nice driver for managers to conveniently hope that staff will learn what they need on the job. And yeah, let's not worry about training them on that. I reckon they'll be fine. I've run into both these things, but certainly, depending on where the power is in an organisation, the wish to increase overtime drives inefficient classroom-based training, especially when it is combined with the wish of a local RTO to use its acceptable models of extensive class-based training. So thirdly, and I think I've talked about this before, industry will take or leave the training system. If it can't be done how we want it, the business will look elsewhere or internal. And I talked about the assets that have done that. And lastly, they have a keener eye on productivity. And this probably just goes back to my previous point about 70-20-10. Broad, time off the job, cost of training. But I should say there's an extra point here. It's about, can the student do the job required? Or do they need, once they've come back from training, further training in order to just do the job? Or further training again to become the high performer we actually want them to become? So, I think I'm running out of time. So quality training, just to finish up, for me is training that efficiently offers value to the organisation, mostly being expressed through better performance on the job, better practices, fewer errors, building of confidence to take on greater responsibility. So much more than compliance. So quickly, some of the issues and some of the things I've heard raised over the past couple of days. I want greater focus on employability skills. That was great. Language, literacy, so forth. Because technical knowledge without communication and interpersonal skills to function in an organisation are counterproductive. The second question was excellence over competence, which was once again raised by the wonderful Kate Coates. It was mentioned yesterday. It's a question the best minds of the industry, Mary Faraone, said it was a question the best of us have struggled with since the creation of the system. Well, now it's time to solve it. Or at least, let's come up with some options and try them. For example, graded assessment. Will it help? How does it currently assist? Should we be considering international models which use graded assessment? I certainly have to, because the head of AGL Merchant Operations is a Canadian, and he did his trade certificate in Canada, and he came out as a power station engineer class 1, which meant as he went along and he demonstrated his competency and a greater ability to develop technical skills and competence, he was offered extension work as he goes through. Still did his time served, but he actually did a significant amount more than someone who would graduate as a class 4. So what can we do in this space? Second thing that needs to be considered is better pathways to undergraduate engineering courses for those with the capacity. Because I want more people in the management of my organisation, like Kate Coates and like Doug Jackson, who I just mentioned, who started on the tools and now in positions of senior management are now smarter than just about everyone on just about everything to do with the business. But simply put, we want to know who the best kids are so that we can reward and encourage them to be the best they can and achieve great things in their careers. And I don't think that's done by giving them the same piece of paper as a kid who sat at the back of the class, arriving late, interrupting and passed by the bare minimum. And it's certainly not the way to attract great kids to trades. Now, if I wasn't running out of time, I would talk a little bit about the fact that I think the NTAGs and tax do need some sharpening up. I go to tax and I don't think I should be there. I'm not a technical guy. I want to go to NTAGs and talk about efficiency, talk about quality training, and for that NTAG to be delivering some clear guidelines to the tax on what we want you to do technically with these units to get them to where we need them to be. I won't talk about state-based training packages. I'm going to talk about I don't know what they're for and why they're there, providing a layer of complexity. Because when I started in this industry, I tried to get some people to explain the system to me, and it took a whole lot of drawing diagrams and lines, ISCs, training packages, units, qualifications, state ISCs, and it was really frustrating. But anyway, thanks for your time today. I've just about precluded questions. Sorry, Phil, I think I did this last time I talked to EOS as well. As I've said at the beginning, I'm not a policies person, so excuse the general incoherence. But I know I have to engage with these issues, and I think you do too. Thank you for listening to my brain dump. Because I think the important thing here is it'd be very easy for EOS to take what AGL is doing and spruik it as a reason for other large generators to engage more strongly with the training package. But what I want this to be is that EOS say, look at how AGL's engagement with the package has improved it and the training that supports it. It's a better system because we as a system were flexible, we as a system and an industry, and I'm talking about the people here, were flexible and aligned with what they wanted to achieve. And the interaction has been valuable and helpful for them and can be for you too. So I greatly look forward to continuing this discussion and our reform and renewal or development of the training package. So thank you very much.